In the turbulent years following the American Revolution, the fledgling United States grappled with a whirlwind of challenges, including economic instability, political division, and widespread skepticism about the power of the new federal government. Amidst these trials, one event stands out as a dramatic turning point in the country's early history. That is the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794. This fiery uprising, igniting in 1791 and culminating in 1794, was fueled by taxation and regional grievances. It became a monumental test of federal authority under the newly ratified Constitution and the nation's first president, George Washington. The Whiskey Rebellion traces its roots to the economic and social realities of post-revolutionary America. The war had left the United States deeply in debt. By the early 1790s, Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton proposed a series of measures to stabilize the economy and establish federal authority. One of these measures was the excise tax on distilled spirits, enacted in 1791. For farmers in the frontier regions, particularly western Pennsylvania, the tax was not just an economic burden, it was a symbol of federal overreach. In these rural communities, distilling whiskey was more than a source of income, it was a way of life. Grain crops were difficult to transport over the rugged terrain to eastern markets, but converting grain into whiskey made it easier to trade. Whiskey even served as a form of currency in these areas, making the tax feel like an affront to their livelihoods. From the outset, the whiskey tax was deeply unpopular in the Western Territories. Farmers and distillers protested that the tax unfairly targeted small producers, while favoring larger urban distilleries that could more easily comply with the law. These grievances soon escalated from peaceful petitions to defiance through civil disobedience and violent outrage. On September 11, 1791, a tax collector named Robert Johnson was riding through his collection route in western Pennsylvania when he was surrounded by a mob of men dressed like women. They got him off his horse, then stripped him naked. After that, they proceeded to tar and feather him, stealing his horse and abandoning him in the woods. This violent act wasn't just a couple of angry farmers blowing off steam, it was an act of protest. It was symbolic. And it sent a clear message that the frontier communities would not submit to what they saw as unjust taxation. More violence ensued. Resistance groups, often calling themselves democratic Republican societies, organized meetings and rallies, spreading anti-tax sentiment throughout the region. The anti-tax movement gained momentum, fueled by resentment toward Hamilton's economic policies and growing fears of centralized power. By 1794, tensions had reached a boiling point. In July of that year, federal tax collector John Neville attempted to enforce the whiskey tax by issuing summons against delinquent distillers. This act ignited widespread unrest. When Neville, a wealthy landowner and staunch supporter of the tax, tried to serve a writ on a farmer, he was met early the next morning by a large group of angry men. The confrontation turned violent, and Neville ordered the men to leave his property. When the mob refused to leave, he shot at the crowd, killing a man by the name of Oliver Miller. The crowd was inflamed and the mob returned fire. Neville managed to escape to a spot in his house where he was able to sound an alarm. Neville's slaves took up arms and began firing into the angry mob. After wounding several people in the crowd dispersed, only to arrive later with as many as 700 men. By this time, Neville had managed to escape with the assistance of Major James Kilpatrick, one of the 10 soldiers who showed up to protect the property. Without Neville there, the crowd found no resolve, and things quickly escalated. They began to set buildings on fire. After an hour of back-and-forth gunfighting, the soldiers surrendered and Bower Estate was burned to the ground. This rebellion quickly spread across western Pennsylvania, with rebels forming militias and threatening federal officials. They created a flag and raised liberty poles, symbols of resistance to oppression, and chanted slogans reminiscent of the Revolutionary War. Their grievances were clear. They saw the whiskey tax as a betrayal of the very ideals for which they had fought during the Revolution. President George Washington, viewing the rebellion as a direct challenge to federal authority, decided to act decisively. Washington and Hamilton believed that failure to enforce the tax would set a dangerous precedent, undermining the government's ability to govern effectively. Washington personally led an army of nearly 13,000 troops, the largest military force assembled during his presidency, to quell the rebellion. This marked the only time in American history that a sitting president led troops into the field. The show of federal force was unprecedented. The sight of thousands of soldiers marching into western Pennsylvania had a chilling effect on the rebellion. Most of the insurgents dispersed without a fight, unwilling to face the overwhelming power of the federal army. Some suspected rebels were rounded up, but in the end, only 2 men were found guilty of treason. While Washington's presence was largely symbolic, it was effective at the time, and in 1784 he handed command over to the governor of Virginia, General Henry Lee III, also known as Light Horse Harry, and the father of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. By the end of 1794, the Whiskey Rebellion had been effectively crushed, but its legacy lingered. Although a few rebel leaders were arrested and 2 were sentenced to death for treason, Washington ultimately pardoned them. This act of clemency was intended to heal the divisions caused by the rebellion and demonstrate the government's capacity for both strength and mercy. The Whiskey Rebellion was a pivotal moment in American history. It was the first major test of federal authority under the Constitution and established the government's right to enforce its laws. It also highlighted the tensions between rural and urban interests, a divide that continues to shape American politics to this very day. The Whiskey Rebellion of 1794 was far more than a dispute over taxation. It was a defining moment for the United States. It tested the strength of the Constitution, showcased the complexities of governing a diverse and divided nation, and set a precedent for how the federal government would respond to internal challenges. Though it may not have had the scale of later conflicts, the rebellion's significance lies in its symbolism. It represented the growing pains of a young republic and laid the foundation for the evolution of federal power in America. As historian Carol Birkin aptly noted, the Whiskey Rebellion was a struggle not just over tax policy, but over the soul of the republic itself. Even today, the echoes of the Whiskey Rebellion can be heard in debates over federal authority, taxation, and the rights of citizens to challenge their government. A reminder that the tensions of the past are never far from the surface of American life. If you liked this video, then please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.